voting, abolition of burdensome petition requirements on independents and third parties, and so working people can actually vote, making Election Day a federal holiday.
Yeah.
I also ask, now you may recognize that many of these reforms are intended to empower third parties. There is nothing democratic about a two-party system when both parties are owned at the highest level by the same powerful interests. I also ask Congress to quickly pass a constitutional amendment restoring the original meaning of this document. The amendment says, corporations and other fictitious entities are not persons under this Constitution and shall have none of the rights and privileges thereof. And now, media reform. I'm ordering the Federal Communications Commission to immediately reinstate the ban on ownership of multiple media outlets. It's time for a return to family-owned newspapers and radio and television stations. The monopoly media conglomerates must sell off their assets immediately. Sorry, Mr. Murdoch. You see, the key to ending fascism is to separate big money and political power, and we're taking steps to do just that. I've asked the Justice Department to indict members of the previous administration, including the former president and vice president, as war criminals. They exploited the 9/11 tragedy to deceive this nation into unnecessary and illegal wars of aggression against Afghanistan and Iraq. They abused their power and violated the Constitution and their oath of office. The evidence of their guilt is absolutely overwhelming. Now, when I was sworn in, as every other president and military officer, I promised to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that includes a renegade president and vice president. Now, if I or any member of my administration ever gives illegal orders such as we have seen lately, I expect the military to refuse them and to take action against us. Your duty to the Constitution far exceeds any perceived loyalty to any individual. The real question is why you members of Congress failed to perform your constitutional duty by impeaching these criminals long ago. There's also evidence of a massive cover-up with respect to 9/11 itself. The official 9/11 report, tightly controlled by the Bush White House, amounts to little but a whitewash. When combined with the confiscation of videotapes, audio tapes, and black boxes and other evidence by the FBI, it is clear that regardless of who was responsible for 9/11, the subsequent cover-up was itself a conspiracy involving elements of the White House and the intelligence establishment. Of course, this raises the question, if the Bush administration had nothing to hide, why did they hide everything? Were they covering up guilt or incompetence? If it was incompetence, why was no one demoted or fired or court-martialed or even reprimanded? And if it was guilt, are the guilty parties Saudis, Pakistanis, Israelis, Americans, all of the above? And why on earth aren't the people's representatives in Congress asking these questions and demanding answers? The American people have still not been told who was really responsible for 9/11. Dedicated researchers have proven that it could not have happened the way the Bush administration said it did. Hijacked airliners do not fly around for an hour and 40 minutes without being intercepted, unless our air defense system was deliberately sabotaged. Indestructible black boxes, and they're not really black, they're bright orange, but never mind. Indestructible black boxes do not evaporate in the same fire from which an unharmed passport floats to the street below. Steel skyscrapers do not implode and collapse at free fall speed because of a kerosene fire. Steel buildings do not collapse at all because of a kerosene fire. Never have and never will. And Building 7 wasn't even struck by an airplane. Now, even if this wild official conspiracy theory of the Bush administration is essentially correct, you know, the one about 19 Arabs with box cutters and an old man on a dialysis machine in a cave. Even if that official conspiracy theory were essentially correct, the American people would still need to know, for example, why their trillion-dollar defense establishment was unable to protect even its own headquarters from an unarmed aircraft. The truth is, about 9/11, after 8 years, we still don't know the truth about 9/11, and we should. And so should the families of victims. I am therefore appointing a commission to conduct a new and truly independent investigation of 9/11. It will be co-chaired by Dr. David Ray Griffith and Stephen Jones and Richard Gage. Never again must we allow this nation to be stampeded into war under false pretenses. Now, 9/11 is not the only truth we're concerned about. There have been many other cover-ups, including the murders of a number of our soldiers in the field, most of them women. If the Pentagon won't do a proper investigation, we'll do it for them. Parents have a right to know what really happened to soldiers like Pat Tillman and Lavina Johnson. Now, most people have heard of Pat Tillman, football star turned war hero turned conscientious objector. The Army now says, well, yeah, he wasn't killed by the enemy, he was killed by friendly fire. What they don't tell you in the media, of course, is that there is evidence that most of the shots that hit Pat Tillman were fired from closer than 10 feet. That's not friendly fire, that's deliberate fragging. It's murder. But there are very few people out there who know about Lavina Johnson. How many of you have heard about Lavina Johnson? A few of you. Good. Well, Lavina Johnson was a lovely young American girl, African-American, Christian, virgin, 18 years old. She volunteered to fight in Iraq. Her body was found in a Halliburton tent. Her body was shipped home in a sealed coffin. And her parents were told not to open the coffin. But her father is a surgeon, a physician. And he opened the coffin and examined his daughter. Her brains had been blown out. There were bruises all over her body. Her hands were badly burned, too badly burned, for example, to hold a gun. And acid had been poured on her genitals in an apparent attempt to destroy DNA evidence. The Army ruled it a suicide. A government that honors the truth must seek out the truth and then tell the truth. And that's what we are going to do. Now, we have at times, including I think the last few years, had a government with bad policies, but we're a good people. What we have long needed is a government which reflects the values and goodness of the American people. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which cooperates with big business to export our jobs and import cheap illegal labor, driving down wages for all American workers. Wages today are a third of what they were in the 1950s. We're taking steps to benefit American workers. I asked Congress to pass legislation indexing the minimum wage for inflation, placing tariffs on importation of goods manufactured by corporations who move jobs out of the country, and limiting the corporate income tax deduction